This is now morphed into really a cottage industry of basically people selling supplements and saying, if you take my supplement, I have scientific data that says I turn back your biological age by 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. The question is, does it really work?
Hello and welcome to the Wellness Zone podcast, where we discuss the science of wellness, metabolism, and the dietary pathways to maintain them. I'm Mary Perry, and I'm here with Dr. Barry Sears, and today we're talking about epigenetic clocks. So Dr. Sears, can you start with what epigenetic clocks are? I know once you kind of dive into a little bit more, it'll be more understanding to individuals, but what do we mean when we say epigenetic clock?
Well, first of all, let's start with what basically we mean about genes. Genes are static. They don't change. However, what basically controls our future and controls our metabolism is epigenetics. How basically genes are basically metabolized or basically turning on and turning off the genes. So the genetic code itself doesn't do much, but the epigenetic code basically controls your future. So the goal of one of these epigenetic clocks is say, can I predict your future, how fast you're aging, by looking at what sites of the DNA are basically epigenetically modified, and basically from that say you're either getting younger or you're getting older before your time.
And how does this relate to your chronological age and your biological age?
Well, first of all, your chronological age is very easy to determine. It's your birthday. It's saying, okay, I know how old I am. Now I'm saying how old am I from a genetic standpoint? Say, perhaps the epigenetic clock will tell us. Well, it turns out, yes, if you look at centenarians versus people who are younger, they have a little different type of epigenetic clock. So you say, okay, this might tell us the rate of aging. Well, there's a lot of things that go into becoming a centenarian other than just the epigenetic clock. But this is now morphed into really a cottage industry of basically people selling supplements and saying, if you take my supplement, I have scientific data that says I turn back your biological age by 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You say, great. So I want to buy more of your supplements. The question is, does it really work?
So are these clocks reliable?
No. It turns out they're not reliable because we're now in our fourth generation of clocks. You say, well, the first generation told us something. But a recent study came out that said, depending on the time of the day you take your sample to look at your epigenetic clock, you can age by 5 years either faster or slower. We'll say, wait a minute, that means these things are worthless. The answer is, yes, they are. Furthermore, there's a difference between doing epigenetic clock research in a laboratory and doing it at your home. In a laboratory, you take out a blood sample, then you separate the plasma from the red blood cells and take the white blood cells, and then separate the neutrophils from the white blood cells, and then look at the white blood cells for their epigenetic clocks. Well, you're going to do this at home? No. So I got an idea. What if I just spit into a tube? Well, besides being filthy, it says that's not a very good way of collecting data. But that's how most epigenetic clocks kits are sold. Just take a spit into the tube, and basically we'll tell you your biological age, or not really your epigenetic age. And so what you can expect, basically it's all over the place. So again, it's really more of a toy than basically a useful aspect to tell how fast am I aging.
So, all right, doctor. So let's go into what would you recommend? So, if people are taking, deciding that they want to test for their biological age. I mean, all of us want to be younger, right? So outside of our chronological age, if someone's interested in slowing down their aging, what do you really recommend if these markers are not the best way to do it? What do you recommend?
Well, the standard ones which have passed the test of time, and there are really three. One, if you want to slow down your rate of aging at any age, you want to reduce insulin resistance. If you want to live as long as possible, you should have no insulin resistance. It means your metabolism is working at peak efficiency. Another marker is the levels of chronic low-level inflammation. Inflammation speeds up the aging process. So you want to determine that, and we do that by looking at the ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA in the blood and keeping that within a suitable target zone between 1.5 and 3. Now, most Americans are around 20, which means they're aging faster than they should be. Mm-hmm. And the final marker is really basically the levels of oxidative stress in your body. That you can look at basically looking at the levels of polyphenols and using a surrogate marker known as glycosylated hemoglobin. And that should be about 5.0%. Now, those are the markers of real aging. So if you say, I want to slow down aging, look at your blood and see what you're doing to basically bring those into their appropriate target ranges when basically we know that you have slowing down the aging process. Now, is there any supplement to do that? No. Oh my God, now what do I do? Well, you had to basically, one, change your diet. And because these are all basically metabolic markers, and basically your diet controls your metabolism. And that's why we've developed metabolic engineering, a dietary system that can go in and change the expression of your genes. You can change the epigenetic patterns. You don't need to spit into a tube to see this. You can see it in terms of those blood markers I've already talked about. The most powerful tool you have to basically activate the metabolism is the zone diet. Yes, it's a calorie-restricted diet, but one without hunger or fatigue, which means you can follow it for a lifetime. The best way to reduce chronic low-level inflammation is by taking adequate levels of omega-3 fatty acids. How much? The blood will tell you. You try to get the ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA between 1.5 and 3. And finally, how to reduce oxidative stress? You basically take enough polyphenols to reduce the levels of glycosylated hemoglobin to about 5.0%. Only when all three markers are in their appropriate ranges are you in the zone. And in the zone, you're now basically, your metabolism is working at peak efficiency. And that means you're going to live longer and you're going to live better. That's science. Now, spitting into a tube and having somebody say, what time did you do it? Did you do it at 12 o'clock at night or 12 at noon? And saying that's basically a toy, a simple toy to say, buy my supplements, we're making progress.
Mm-hmm. So what I like about this too, Dr. Sears, is really it's a three-pronged approach to all of the things that we know help to reduce aging: calorie restriction, anti-inflammation, and, reducing free radical formation. So going back to the blood test though, Dr. Sears, the insulin resistance, what is the best blood marker in terms of measuring that? Do you recommend the triglyceride to HDL ratio? Do you recommend getting your insulin levels tested? So just where people can find these tests.
Well, the standby for testing insulin resistance has always been what's called HOMA-IR. That you need to get a fasting insulin, and that basically is a little more difficult because it's more fragile. Another marker is the ratio of triglycerides to HDL. But the best marker appears to be basically what's called the glucose or triglyceride glucose index. And this comes from a fasting glucose and a fasting triglycerides that you get a standard blood test. And then you can just plug the numbers in and say, where do you stand? If you're more than 4.4, you're probably aging faster than you should be. If you're less than 4.4, you're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Perfect. So 2 of these tests you can get right down at your doctor's office, and then there's the calculators online to plug in the numbers and see where you fall. And then if people want to get the AA to EPA ratio, where do you recommend them going?
I recommend going to a zone living. We basically have these finger stick tests. Nobody likes to give blood. It hurts. But even a finger stick test, even I can do that. Well, I can't do it, but if you prick my finger, then it doesn't hurt. So again, finger stick tests are the most more likely to basically be done, and they're very reliable. So again, for the A1C and the ratio of arachidonic acid to EPA, those are great tests that basically Zone Living offers. And then getting basically a standard blood test when you're going for your physical, fasting glucose and fasting triglycerides, then you have it all there. So bring those into their appropriate ranges, and metabolic engineering is the best, in my opinion, of doing that. Then you know you're slowing down the aging process.
Perfect. And Dr. Sears, last thing, we only just skimmed the surface on metabolic engineering. So if people want to learn more about what goes into metabolic engineering and the science behind it, where should they go?
Well, for the science, I would go to drsears.com. We try to explain the complexities of metabolism. Now, for the products that make it easier to basically change your metabolism and slow down the aging process, I'd recommend going to zoneliving.com.